The Apples channel was once a buzzing community of over 200,000 members online here on YouTube who rallied behind a young woman with non-smoking lung cancer during her most difficult days fighting this terrible disease. Now, the channel has lost thousands of followers in the last few months, and people are questioning why. What was the trigger? What was the change? Why have so many people, legacy viewers, left? And why are they still continuing to leave today? Join me as we explore the Apple Channel Viewer Count Investigation. This report includes estimated trend modeling and analytical interpretation based on public-facing patterns, so I am presenting it as a commentary piece, not as a claim of exact private analytics. And that matters because the report's main conclusion is this: the apples didn't simply drop off. It experienced a rise, a legacy spike, a long sympathy plateau, and then what the report frames as active decline. And that sequence matters because it tells us this wasn't one event, it was phases. Let's talk about peak viewership first. According to the report, the Apples reached its greatest subscriber velocity and highest engagement in the last quarter of 2023, when the peak centered around November 2023. That was the period when the emotional stakes were at their absolute highest. The report estimates that the channel crossed the 200,000 subscriber threshold during the final stages of Jenny's life, and that viewership surged dramatically during the tribute period surrounding her passing. And from a YouTube perspective, that makes sense. When a channel has a strong emotional narrative, a deeply invested audience, and a story people feel compelled to witness in real time, you often see accelerated community-based growth. People weren't just watching for updates, they were truly invested. The report says that the channel's peak videos during that era averaged roughly 300,000 to 500,000 views, with some tribute era content reaching much higher. It also suggests total lifetime views pushed past 60 million, eventually reaching around 66.5 million by April 2026. So the peak wasn't just about subscribers, it was about momentum. And there's a very important phrase in this report: legacy spike. That refers to the burst of attention that often comes after a creator's death when YouTube begins surfacing older content, tribute content, and emotionally significant uploads to both loyal viewers and cold audiences. In other words, the audience didn't just include longtime followers. A whole second wave of people discovered the channel because the story itself had become widely shareable, emotionally compelling, and algorithmically recommendable. And that appears to be the true peak. Not just Jenny's final months, but the period around her passing and the immediate tribute aftermath. So, if someone asks, when did the Apples hit its top viewership? Based on this report, the answer is late 2023, especially November 2023, and the tribute period immediately after. Now here is a deeper question. Why did it peak there? The report gives a very strong clue. First, it says the channel built was essentially a psychological contract with the audience. Viewers were not just subscribing to content, they were subscribing to a person, a journey, and a family story with real stakes. This wasn't a generic lifestyle channel. It was anchored by Jenny's presence and by a life and death narrative that naturally created extremely high emotional investment. The story shifted into its final and most urgent phase, with peak growth accelerating between June 2023 and November 2023. And in YouTube terms, urgency changes everything. It raises return viewership. It raises emotional commitment. It makes people more likely to click updates, comment, share, and feel like they need to stay caught up. The channel's narrative was clear. People understood what the channel was about. They understood who they were following. They understood the emotional mission of the content. And when a channel has that level of clarity, the algorithm has an easier job too, because viewers know what to expect, and more importantly, they care. This comment was from a viewer who stated they went to the mountains for 3 days to be alone with God and to pray for Jenny. It says, in part, I prayed at sunrise and sunset and throughout the days for you. I prayed for healing and for God's covering of peace. I am so sad that you are in the hospital. You are loved by so many, and it's unimaginable just how many prayers are being sent your way. So the channel peaked not just because the story was sad. It peaked because the channel had a powerful center of gravity. Jenny was that center of gravity. The journey was the center of gravity. The emotional truth of the channel was a center of gravity. And when the center is strong, everything else tends to perform better. Now, this is where the report gets really interesting, because it says the decline did not begin in the loud, obvious way many people might assume. According to Gemini, after Jenny passed in November 2023, the channel entered what it calls a sympathy buffer. This important concept says that viewers stay subscribed out of loyalty even while engagement drops. The idea is that people stayed subscribed out of loyalty, grief, respect, or emotional attachment, even if they were already watching less. So on paper, the channel still looked stable. The report says subscriber counts hovered around 201,000 throughout much of 2024, even while average views had already fallen sharply compared to the peak era. That means the first stage of decline may have been mostly invisible if you were only looking at subscriber count. And that happens on YouTube all the time. A channel can look healthy from the outside because the subscriber number stays high. But underneath that, click-through rate may be slipping. Average view duration may be slipping. Returning viewer loyalty may be slipping. And the audience may already be emotionally checking out. That's why this matters so much. The report suggests the channel's real decline actually started quietly in early to mid 2024, not as a dramatic collapse, but as a drop in active engagement hidden beneath a stable subscriber total. That is a very different story from the channel crashed the moment Jenny passed. According to this analysis, it didn't crash. It plateaued first, and then the real rupture came later. So when did the quiet disengagement turn into actual active decline? According to the report, the most visible turning point came in March 2026. That's when Gemini says the channel experienced a loss of roughly 1,000 subscribers, dropping from around 201,000 back to 200,000. And the report treats that as significant. Why? Because it suggests the sympathy period had expired. People who had stayed subscribed out of habit, respect, or unresolved attachment were no longer just passively ignoring uploads. They were finally choosing to opt out. And what was happening around that time? The report points to a major narrative shift away from grief and legacy content and more towards new life, new relationship, and engagement related content. And that's where the audience fracture becomes more visible. According to the report, the issue was not merely that the content changed, it was that the identity of the channel changed in a way that many legacy viewers did not emotionally accept. Because audiences can survive content evolution, but they often struggle when the underlying emotional agreement changes. If viewers originally subscribed to follow Jenny's journey, Jenny's strength, Jenny's voice, Jenny's family unit, and Jenny's legacy, then later content may have felt to some viewers like it belonged to a whole different emotional universe. And when that mismatch gets strong enough, the algorithm feels it too. Lower click through rate, lower return viewers, lower engagement quality, and eventually lower reach. So, according to this report, the channel didn't just lose interest. It hit what Gemini describes as a parasocial breach, the point where viewers no longer feel aligned with what the channel now represented. Now let's look at the numbers Gemini provided for the current state of the channel. According to the report, the Apples had around 66.5 million total views as of April 2026. But the more revealing numbers are in the comparison. At peak, the report estimates average views per video around 350,000 plus, monthly view totals around 5 million or more, and monthly revenue potentially in the $15,000 to $25,000 range. Now compare that to the current era described in the report. Many uploads are landing around 20,000 to 100,000 views, with some estimates even lower. Monthly views around 600,000 to 800,000, and estimated monthly revenue closer to $800 to $1,800. That is a dramatic change. And Gemini's report frames it this way. The channel is now being sustained more by its archive than by the power of its current uploads. This is a very important key insight because a channel with a large legacy library can continue pulling in views and revenue from old content even while its new content engine weakens. And if that's true here, then the subscriber number alone may be masking the real issue. The report estimates that only 10 to 15% of the legacy subscriber base may still be actively engaging with new uploads. If that estimate is anywhere close, that points to a serious ghost subscriber problem. A channel that looks big but no longer converts that size into reliable present-day performance. So what does Gemini ultimately argue caused the decline? The central theory is brand misalignment. The audience originally formed around one mission, one emotional anchor, and one central identity. But over time, the channel's direction changed while still carrying the same legacy branding. And, according to the report, that created a widening disconnect between what viewers originally subscribed for and what they were later being asked to emotionally follow. That disconnect appeared to happen in stages. First, the audience stayed out of loyalty. Then viewership softened, then sentiment became more polarized, then the newer narrative triggered stronger resistance. Then some of the remaining legacy audience began actively unsubscribing. This is the story that Gemini is telling, not one collapse, a delayed unraveling. And honestly, that's what makes this so fascinating from a YouTube strategy standpoint, because this wasn't just a numbers issue, it was an identity issue. Not simply did the videos perform, but did the audience still believe this was the same channel? And according to this report, that answer has increasingly become no. So here's the bottom line. According to Gemini analysis, the apples reached peak viewership in late 2023, especially around November 2023, when emotional urgency, tribute traffic, and algorithmic reach all collided. The decline did not appear as an immediate collapse. Instead, the channel first entered a loyalty-based plateau, what the report calls a sympathy buffer, where subscribers' numbers held while engagement quietly weakened. Then by March 2026, the report says that the channel crossed into a more visible phase of active decline, with subscriber losses becoming harder to ignore and the audience increasingly fractured over the channel's newer direction. In other words, peak, then plateau, then rupture. And whether you agree with every conclusion in the report or not, one thing is very clear. This channel story was never just about views. It was about emotional alignment between creator, audience, and identity. It was about Jenny's legacy, her fight to live, her voice to be there for her children forever, to know that she tried so hard to be there with them as long as possible. And once that changed, the numbers seemed to change with it. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think the Apple's channel decline really began in 2024? Or do you think viewers were always going to leave no matter what happened next? And if you're interested in more investigative pieces like this, please subscribe because I have much more coming in the near future. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.